Okay, and welcome to Learning Target 3.5, Cellular Respiration. You are moving along well into Unit 3 at this point, Organization and Patterns in Life. Congratulations, you're almost done. A couple more learning targets after it for the unit. Cellular respiration is the next topic of study here. It's in some ways almost the opposite of photosynthesis, the learning target that you just finished. And your learning target here is to be able to explain how cellular respiration works, including what it uses and what it makes, as well as where it occurs inside of a cell. So again, we're looking at an organelle here. We're looking inside of a cell. I want to give you a little bit of a background, though, before we get into exactly what cellular respiration is. Just as a refresher, heterotrophs and consumers, which are organisms that are not able to make their own energy or own food, unlike autotrophs, they do cellular respiration. So all these organisms that you see listed here are all heterotroph consumers, and they all actually, well, it looks like it's, oh yeah, this is a herbivore here. So they all actually require cellular respiration to be done because they need to eat other organisms to get their energy. That said, autotroph producers also do cellular respiration in addition to photosynthesis. However, they make their own food that they then use for cellular respiration, which you'll see later on in the slideshow. So let's focus in on here the organelle that's responsible for cellular respiration. That organelle is the mitochondria. Excuse me. Okay. Sorry. That organelle is the mitochondria. That is where cellular respiration takes place. It is a cell organelle. It's a working part of the cell and is found in both animal cells and plant cells. So you can see that this is where mitochondria is, right here inside of a cell. And this is what they look like. Sometimes I say they look like a hot dog with mustard on them. These are the two things that cellular respiration needs. These are known as the reactants. Oxygen, O2, and glucose, which is C6H12O6. Those are the two reactants that are needed for cellular respiration to take place, and those two things need to get inside of the mitochondria. Sometimes you'll see questions about, well, where do the things that are required for cellular respiration come from? More specifically, what organ systems do they come from? You should be able to respond with the respiratory system and the digestive system. If you think about it, the respiratory system, which includes our lungs, is able to take in air and breathe in. We breathe in air along with oxygen. So the oxygen comes from our lungs or our respiratory system. And the glucose, it comes from our food. Glucose is a simple sugar. When we break down complex carbohydrates like starches and other polysaccharides, large sugar particles, the simpler sugar form of that is glucose. So you should also know that the digestive system is where sugar comes from, or where glucose comes from. And these two organ systems provide the reactants that are used in cellular respiration inside of the mitochondria. Now what's made? Well, when those glucose and oxygen gets inside of the mitochondria, what happens is a reaction takes place, and bonds are broken, and bonds are made, and molecules are rearranged to make these three products. The products are the things that are made. It includes ATP energy, which is a type of energy that's used for metabolic processes inside of a cell. It creates carbon dioxide, and it creates water. It's really easy to see that we make carbon dioxide and water. Actually, you can actually feel this for yourself. When you breathe out, you should know that you breathe out of your lungs carbon dioxide, right? Also, you should be able to see, especially on a cold winter day, some of the water that comes out of your lungs in the form of water vapor or steam. If you breathe on the back of your hand or you breathe on a mirror, you'll see that there's condensation that forms, and that's primarily in some ways from the water that you breathe out, in addition to the ATP energy that is made. And that ATP energy is just another type of energy that comes from glucose energy. And interestingly, we're taking light energy from photosynthesis and turning it into glucose energy, and we're taking that glucose energy and turning it into ATP energy. We're just rearranging molecules to make different substances so our cells can operate and do what they need to do. So here we have the entire equation. We have oxygen plus glucose creates carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. You should be able to explain what the reactants are, or what are the things that are needed, and you should be able to explain what the products are. And also, just like we said in the previous slide, you should be able to tell us what organ system does each reactant come from? So where does the oxygen and the glucose come from? What organ system? So here's an overview of cellular respiration. You should know that cellular respiration is a metabolic process. You'll see this word come up every once in a while. Metabolism or metabolic. It just basically means your body is doing things. It's working. It's carrying on its life functions. And cellular respiration is the metabolic process that happens inside of our body. That's how we make our energy. And that energy that we make is called ATP, and it comes from our food. When our digestive system breaks down our food, it oftentimes is broken down into simple sugars like glucose, and that glucose is turned into ATP, which you see happening here. When oxygen is present, glucose gets broken down inside of the mitochondria, and it creates carbon dioxide, water, and that ATP energy that we use inside of our body. Here's another way to look at it. Sometimes you'll see Regents questions like this actually. You'll see a bunch of arrows in here, and maybe they'll cover up the carbon dioxide. And they'll say, then they'll put, instead of carbon dioxide, they'll put an X. And you'll need to know, well, what is the substance that's coming out of the mitochondria? And you should be able to say carbon dioxide. Or they may cover up all of these processes. They may cover up the organelle and say, what organelle does this process occur in? And you should be able to say mitochondria. Or they might cover up cellular respiration and give you just the things, and they might say, what's the name of this process that takes place? So one thing I would do here is practice just covering up the different parts here and being able to explain what is missing. It's a good way to practice the formula as well. So again, you have the reactants here and the products on this side. So I would go ahead and practice that a few times. Then one last connection that I want to make is something that maybe you've already kind of realized, but I want to make it explicitly clear to you here. And that is the processes of photosynthesis and cellular respiration are inextricably linked. Meaning without one, you couldn't have the other. And without the other, you couldn't have that first one. So let's take a look at this, right? If we start with the chloroplast, which we know is only inside of plant cells, when sunlight enters the chloroplast, photosynthesis can take place in the presence of carbon dioxide and water. So when carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight are present inside of inside the chloroplast, photosynthesis takes place, and we create oxygen and glucose. I shouldn't say we, but plants or autotrophs create oxygen and glucose. That same oxygen and glucose that is created by chloroplasts inside of plants or autotrophs is then gone and used by the mitochondria. Now, sometimes those mitochondria are found inside plant cells, or sometimes those mitochondria are found inside of animal cells. And what we see happening is the oxygen and glucose enters the mitochondria, and when that happens, it creates carbon dioxide and water and a new type of energy called ATP, and a little bit of waste it's called heat or excess heat, because these processes, metabolic processes, they create heat. So really, all that we're taking here is we're taking one type of energy, sunlight energy, turning it into glucose energy in the chloroplast, and taking that glucose energy and turning it into a different type of energy called ATP. So that might be another question that you see come up. What are the three different types of energy that are being used in chloroplasts and mitochondria, or in photosynthesis and cellular respiration? So I just want to bring that up here because these two processes, although we looked at them differently in different learning targets, you should understand that they are connected to one another. And maybe by understanding these connections, you'll be able to better remember each of those processes individually. That's learning target 3.5, cellular respiration. Go on to the activity now, watch the videos that are prepared, and then prepare for the verbal quiz. When you're ready, come and see me.